So employers dislike surprises and they like the underdog. So to recap, how to say it. I am counseling you to suggest to your justice impacted job seekers to bring it up somewhere toward the end of the interview. So that's something like, I've made a bad decision in my younger years, but I'm really proud of what I've done recently. I know that ABC company is really interested in a dynamic workforce. 1 in 5 Californians has a justice impact, and that's me. But lately, I've finished this education or I finished this course of training, and I may eligible for a California bonding program, or I may be WOTC eligible, which represents thousands of dollars in federal tax credits. So that's going to take a little bit to get your client to be comfortable saying those words. And that's why our practice and modeling is so important. But that's really how to bring it up and then how to minimize it. Because that way your HR specialist, your manager isn't surprised when it does come up. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about the California labor codes that govern this. And it's because of these labor codes that it is such an interesting and empowering idea to be the one that brings it up, because then we are controlling the narrative. So let's take a look at some of the California labor codes that specifically talk about justice involvement and employment. The first one, you don't have to remember the name of any of these, but just know Labor Code 432.7 specifically prohibits any employer from asking applicants about some aspects of their history. You can't ask me while I am an applicant. And it's talking about criminal charges that didn't end in a conviction. So if I was brought up on charges, maybe trespassing as part of like a protest, and so a whole bunch of people were arrested and brought up on charges of trespassing, but they were just dismissed. So we're not asking our job applicants anything about that. Pretrial or post-trial diversion programs. So perhaps homelessness leads to things like loitering charges. Well, instead of actually now saddling this person with a criminal conviction, could we do things pre-trial before it gets there and maybe get them into housing, maybe get them into an alcohol or drug treatment program, and then the charges sort of stop there. Dismissed or sealed convictions. Now, a dismissal is more likely to happen than an expungement. And we'll talk about the difference between dismiss and expunge in a little bit. And what we want to really go for here is that a few years after our convictions, we've turned that leaf. We are now in our new successful story. We're well into our chapters beyond our justice. We can go through programs. We'll talk about those programs in a minute, and that we can get a dismissal or an expungement. So none of these are being mentioned. And then it's prohibited to make that hiring decision based on my justice involvement. You are, the kind of loophole for the employer is that they may ask about current pending charges, because if something is pending, it's in front of you. And that might mean missed time from work. That might mean warrants or subpoenas or arrests made on employer property. So you are allowed as an employer to, in California, in the application, ask about pending charges. And that's a really important distinction, because the majority of our clients aren't going to have anything pending, but they might. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. So that's the most important labor code, 432.7. The next one we're going to take a quick peek at is the Fair Chance Act. And even by the name, Fair Chance Act, we know that we're going to have an opportunity to advance through the application process the same as everybody else. Let's give everybody a fair chance. You must evaluate the applicant's qualifications, their education, their work history, their package before you're allowed to do a background check. You have to have the job offer in place, and then you're allowed to run the background check. So that is a huge change, sort of the order of operations there. And that's a very substantial and significant piece of legislation that does help make it fair. Because if I had a criminal background, you have to look at me, decide you want me, offer me the job, like do the steps to like start my onboarding, and then you're allowed to run my background check. And when you tag team this with what we learned previously, with the power of disclosing our justice involvement during the interview, toward the end of the interview, the employer's not going to be surprised. Oh, I know there's going to be something back there, but this person is moved way beyond it. Assurance, accountability, right? We know it's fine. Look at their recent accomplishments. Now that's a choice as a career coach you have to make, and the client has to make. But if they don't disclose in the interview, they're going to be protected because you have to have the offer in place, and then you can run the background check. Now, where this does get a little complicated is once the background check is run and the results come back, the employer, if it's too recent, so like if their release is too recent, or if their conviction is too related to the job they will be performing. So for example, if I have a recent conviction for passing bad checks, forgery, and bank robbery, it's very, very unlikely I would win in an equal employment opportunity case where I would bring Bank of America up on Fair Chance Act charges to say, oh, you didn't extend the offer and keep it extended, even though my background came back. Bank of America would say, yeah, because your charges were so recent and they were relevant to our banking industry, they're allowed. And that wouldn't be a violation of the Fair Chance Act. So our justice impacted men and women have to kind of reflect, what were my charges in, and does that relate to the industry I'm trying to get in? And so the Fair Chance Act provides us this opportunity to be a viable candidate, to have the employer pick us, and then take a look at the background check, which is a really powerful order of operations. As career coaches, though, what we want to think about is that we are allowed to ask our clients, so I may best help you. Do you have any pending charges? And then just sort of assuring them that having a background, being a justice impacted citizen, is not the barrier to success that maybe it has been in the past, but that pending charges we are allowed to ask. And occasionally, when you think about those recidivism rates, almost half of our recently released men and women within the last 3 years, they are unfortunately getting rearrested, getting reconvicted. That is a lot of pending charges. So you and I are not attorneys. And of course, none of this is legal advice. And we're not giving legal advice to our clients. But knowing these laws, just a quick double check on pending charges, because the person probably would know. They would know because it's something ongoing and present, as opposed to I've been released, I've paid my debt to society, and I'm ready for my next chapter. Good. Now, this is a word you've heard a lot about, ban the box. And so ban the box, it applies to public sector employers. So that's the majority of employers that our clients might be working with. You are allowed to inquire into the background only after that they meet the minimum requirements for the position. And then the Fair Chance Act goes even further, and that's after you extend the offer. Employers can't run background checks like a filter. You can't. It's just not fair and equitable, which gives our clients a really good chance, the same chance as everyone else. Now, I have a short video for you just to sort of hear directly from someone who's justice impacted. This was a little news excerpt going back a little bit of years, and it's in Maryland. but it talks specifically about the unique challenges faced by female justice impacted citizens and our older justice impacted citizens, because this is the population that has some additional barriers, perhaps sexism, perhaps ageism, on top of some of the other barriers that our other justice impacted citizens do face upon release. Those were the issues we talked about in the chat earlier today. So here's just a quick minute and a half of this little video.
A 53-year-old woman, Betty Brown, is
I'm going to pause it there to make sure. Can I get a thumbs up?
leaving prison after 29 years.
Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear the sound? I just want to make sure that the audio is also being shared. Okay, thank you, James.
The wardens say women age faster in prison.
Am I scared? Am I afraid? Absolutely. Because I've been locked up for such a long time. But I'm going to be all right.
America has an unprecedented number of older women serving long sentences in prison. Betty's blood pressure is high. She's on seizure medications. In for second-degree murder, she was a mentor over the years for Solana Stokes.
Oh, baby, always crying. Oh, God. Let me tell you something. The same way that I made it, you're going to make it.
This one prisoner has cost taxpayers more than $1 million during her incarceration. And after all these years, Betty is taking with her $50, 5 boxes of books, and a thank you for the warden.
Miss Chippendale. It's a Kumikami say. It was nice knowing you.
Thank you very much.
Just a few more steps. Gotta make it. I made it this far. Oh, real air. Real air.
Warden Chippendale has nearly 90 programs in Maryland.
Makes a difference when they leave?
I think it makes a huge difference.
Experts say education reduces recidivism by 43%. Goucher College offers classes in Maryland, but there's a waiting list. In addition to the programs, Warden Chippendale says something else is important: keeping a woman connected to humanity.
So that was just a brief little video focusing on one particular inmate. And that one particular inmate recently released represents just a huge diversity that you may face as a career coach, as helping somebody with justice involvement kind of find their next chapter. So overcoming shame and fear. And we're going to spend the majority of our time tonight on this topic because it is so essential. Doing things in a trauma-informed way, really centering the job seeker, validating and honoring the diversity of emotions that they may be facing is really important, because it was Franklin Covey who said, with people, slow is faster. And with this population, definitely it is. Pardon me. So I'm going to give you a minute. I'd like you to read this slide in silence. Check it out. So our justice impacted job seekers are probably feeling a lot of different ways. And it really, you can't even extend your most recent experience with a justice impacted job seeker to the next one, because their individual experiences are so unique to them. Their journey through the justice system, any, family support that they had, how long they were down for, and that's the vernacular that they may use, at how many months or years were they incarcerated, which institution, in which state, because as you can imagine, the experience of an out-of-state incarceration compared to a California incarceration. I'm thinking particularly of Arizona and some of the stuff that was happening in Maricopa County. So your job seeker might be coming from a different place, maybe coming from a different part of California. You are not always incarcerated in the area where you lived before. And most of the time, they will relocate you quite far away on purpose because new friends, new peers, new social situations, maybe intentionally trying to break any gang affiliation. And so the San Diego job seeker that you may be helping might not have been from here. So on top of all of the psychosocial development issues, things like frustration and hopelessness, self-confidence issues, you may also have a lack of familiarity with San Diego itself and knowing the roads, pronouncing the roads correctly. These are all sort of the small things that show in-group and out-group. In-group, you belong here. You're one of us. You're San Diegan. Out-group, oh, you mispronounced Hamishaw Road. You're not sure where La Jolla is. And so there's that whole element of culture that the local employer is aware of. So that's an additional complication on top. So the things we talked about earlier with the applicant tracking system and the importance of keyword integration are going to help with this first aspect. Applying for a role, only hearing silence. When you and I apply for a role and we don't hear back from the employer, we're going to be annoyed, but we don't have the additional burden of attributing that silence to our justice involvement. And that is a major burden to be carrying on our shoulders, to assume that it wasn't keyword integration because you don't know about keyword integration, and you attribute all of your previous being shut out of different opportunities, whether it's true or not true, you're attributing it to the fact that you have a criminal record. And so that's now creating a negative feedback spiral of, I have a record, I'm being shut out. I'm being shut out because I have a record. So why should I even try, right? And it turns out, no, you're actually being shut out because a computer that doesn't know you, can't see you, doesn't know anything else, except they were looking for the following 5 keywords: dedicated and enthusiastic customer service professional. Well, if you'd only had the word customer service, you're only in 2 of the 5 keywords. So of course you're not being invited to an interview. It's got nothing to do with anything. It's got to do with the artificial intelligence of the meta crawler running the ATS system. That's what's shutting you out. But the justice impacted job seeker is going to attribute that shutout incorrectly. Having a successful interview, right? The nerves that goes along with that, the terror that goes along with that, the excitement that goes along with that, and then later, not in violation of the Fair Chance Act or any of the labor codes we've learned about, like, oh, I'm sorry, the only thing you've ever done was finance. You're a white collar criminal. Your crime was a financial crime. And now you're trying to get hired with Merrill Lynch, only for Merrill Lynch, as an example, to say, no, unfortunately, we did look at you, we did extend you the offer, but you have a financial crime. And so we are going to retract that job offer. And that is heartbreaking. So that absolutely could happen. So we want to try to be aware of what are the industries, what are those convictions? And remember, we talked about before, often there are a few different convictions and the job seeker may not even be aware of what they are. It could have wobbled up to a felony and they thought it might have wobbled down to a misdemeanor and they thought it wouldn't even be on the paper, but it is, or other things like that, other charges added. Things like resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, those can be felonies. And the employer may use those to say, oh, relevant. So the employer is aware of these laws. and doesn't want to run afoul of an EEOC claim or expose themselves to, legal action to be discriminatory or prejudice in its hiring policies. But at the same time, the employer wants to make sure that they're hiring the right fit candidate with the right skills, the right personality, the right fit for the role. So that's why tailoring becomes so important. And those 3 A's, that assurance, that accountability, and those accomplishments. Good. So talking a little bit more, shame and fear, they may actually keep your client from disclosing lots of different barriers. And knowledge is power. Once I know that the person across the table from me is working with this additional complication, I can pivot our conversation about interviewing. I can make sure we're doing a really, really good job on keyword integration. So what I want to do here is I want us to use the whiteboard function. We'll do this in just a moment. What would you do if the client spontaneously indicated that they had a criminal background? Because occasionally you don't know in advance. And so we want to think that we would react appropriately, but you're here tonight demonstrating your commitment to being the coach that you want to be for this population. And we need to very quickly monitor our own communication, both verbally and non-verbally. You may have a facial expression of shock or disgust, a micro expression that turns into a microaggression. We need to be aware of our own implicit and explicit biases and our passive aggression. Occasionally, what happens when you find out that someone is justice involved, what if they were justice involved because of something like child abuse? Right? You would still need to be able to provide them the highest level of professional service that you would to the rest of your caseload, even though that person lets you know, hey, during the darkest days of my addiction, I'm not proud, but I have a background. I was arrested and I did 2 years in Las Colinas for child neglect. Right? As a career coach, we're responsible for keeping our initial reactions of like shock, anger, sadness, disgust, frustration, that we have a very, very small window in a spontaneous disclosure. And I don't think that's something that is talked about a lot. And I do think it's something that's very, very important, because we could accidentally be contributing to that shame and fear sort of negative feedback loop. Like, see, even my case manager thinks I'm awful, right? And there we have accidentally contributed, to that shame and that fear. We want to set the tone. We want to address and minimize their background in a really culturally sensitive, trauma-informed way that is future focused. And future focus is my own view when this is happening. So we're going to practice. I'm going to do a new share and we're going to talk about the whiteboard. And the question I have for us is, what could we say to a client who discloses their justice involvement? What could we say to a client who discloses their justice involvement? So we're going to share our screen and we're going to call up the whiteboard. Right, here it is. And if you click on the text here in the top left, what, and then click in it, what could we say? And then you can click on that little T. And I'd like to see it. I'd like to hear it from you. If someone spontaneously kind of discloses I think that's something that is maybe important to start. So Brian's got the like the pen where you're like drawing it, it might be easier if you click the T for text.
I do not see the T for text. Where would that be?
It is, as I'm
Hiding
sharing,
behind.
yeah, it could be hiding behind.
No, it's not.
No, okay. Well, how about if you'd like, you can just
I
click mute and
think, let me
see it.
see.
I'll type it as you say it. What would you think? Nick has a good one. She says, use your poker face and continue assisting the client, right? Like, and I love that phrase, like poker face, really, you know, catch yourself in that moment, you know, think, smile and remain calm.
I would ask, may I? Or you want me to put it on the chat?
Sure, the chat would be great. Maritza shares a great one. She says,
Okay.
thank you for sharing this with me. I wonder if I can share some resources I just learned about with the San Diego Workforce Partnership. And we're going to talk about resources to share with the job seeker in just a moment. So that's brilliant, really keeping it kind of future focused. Here in the chat, or you want to choose annotate first. That's the word annotate, and then that opens up the text. It's at the bottom. There's like mute, stop video, participants. One of those words is going to say annotate, and then the text box will come up. Can you tell me how this has affected your job search? That's a huge one, right? Rosario is kind of keeping it here and now focused. How has that impacted your job search up to this point? Because if it was many years ago and maybe they're a little like years away from it and it's impacting not very much, but you know, maybe this is an important career move they're going for and they're kind of worried about it, you know, rearing up from the past. Brian has a great one. I appreciate your honesty. You may be surprised to know that 1 in 5 Californian job seekers is also just as impacted. Brian, that's brilliant. That's kind of validating and in a way normalizing 1 in 5. That's such a high number, and be like, yeah, you know, that's true. Like, I'm not alone, you know, in 10 people, there's 2 of us, right? Good. So we'll leave the annotation up for a little bit more and the chat up for just another minute to let final thoughts. And then we'll dive back into the rest of the slideshow, which focuses on solutions and resources for you. Right, good. So I'm going to clear all the drawings and share fresh. Thank you very much for your excellent suggestions and excellent responses. So now we're going to do something in the breakout room. We're going to do a little bit of role playing. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms randomly with 2 people. If your breakout room partner is not responsive, right? I said, you know, take a load off, rest, relax. So maybe their person is in the bathroom at the moment or grabbing a pastrami sandwich. If your partner's not there, no problem. You can just do it on your own. One member of the breakout room pair will be the role of the career coach. The other member of the pair will play the role of a justice impacted client. I have a bunch of sample criminal backgrounds and names that I'm going to put in each of your chats, and the names and the offenses are randomly generated. I used a role-playing name generator, so the names aren't even like real names that of anyone. For the coach, you want to focus on reacting appropriately in those 3 A's: assurance, accountability, and accomplishments. So we'll be doing this for a few minutes, and then when we're done and we come back, we'll talk about San Diego resources. So let me create some breakout rooms for us. There's 2 or 3 participants per room, and that way it increases our odds of having 2 active participants. And then in the chat, I'm gonna like quickly paste in some names and some justice involvement. So I'm going to open up all the rooms. You'll click join, and then I'll paste the justice involvement in your room. So you'll click join. So for folks on the screen, you physically have to click the join button. Hi guys. Well, you're both retiring. So if there's a group that you were like, you know what, I think we can just eat ice cream now, it would be your group.
Yeah, you posted something, but it came so quickly.
I'll post it again, everybody.
I didn't see the whole thing, and I saw like a name, but I didn't process it, and then I saw the word robbery.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. Let me post it again. Thank you. I'll do that right now.
We saw it, the Grand Theft Auto.
So like, what would you do? So I know that neither of you is like doing kind of direct, career coaching with particular clients, but it helps if you're ever like getting pulled, oh, can you, help, as kind of a senior staff. It's something that you might face with, maybe a junior staff that pulls you in to support.
So I was telling George that the reason why I asked, tell me how it has affected you, because I don't want to assume anything, and I want to know if they have gotten to the interview, and if they have, then we need to work on interviewing skills and how to answer the difficult questions and getting to the scripts that you were describing, which are wonderful. I hope you have them written down so that we can use them. And, but if they're not getting interviews, then we'll definitely need to work on wording on the applications. And, so depending on how it has affected them, and then also bring them down to earth if, if their conviction is in auto theft, then and they want to go into car sales, then it's probably best if they don't. So,
Absolutely. Rosario, that is such a brilliant response. Thank you. Right on. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to head to the main room and just broadcast a quick, final 2 minutes message, but thank you again, both for your contribution.
Thank you. Awesome presentation.
Those mistakes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And then the recent accomplishments. So what I've accomplished in the last 2 years since I was released.
Yes.
What have I done with my time? What am I involved in? What am I passionate about? How, and so, yeah, discussing those accomplishments that
Right.
would, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it said that she wanted us to wrap it up. So,
Rebecca, you want us to wrap it up?
She's right here looking like, come on.
That was
okay.
amazing. No, that was a really good summary, Brian. Thank you. I appreciate that you guys are taking this kind of seriously because I mean, it definitely might happen, you know, in our professional or personal
Mhm.
lives.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes, you
Yeah,
know
it's,
that's what
this
I
is,
do, Rebecca.
yeah, and this is something that I haven't practiced before with clients because I'm very new to the DOR. And
Mm,
so I'm just starting to work with justice impacted in job seekers. I worked with them in other capacities, like as a mental health case manager, but not in a job employment
mhm.
role.
Right, exactly. Good. Well, I wish you only the best, you know, of good fortune and good success. It's such a vital and useful, you know, role that we really, it's underserved and underfunded. So it means a lot that you, you know, come over and do this as your vocation. So I just wish you
Yeah,
continued success with it. So I'm going
thank
to jump
you.
back to the main room and then I'll click the like
Okay,
1 minute to go button.
okay,
Thank you,
sounds good.
Rebecca.
Thanks.
You guys. Everybody will be starting to pop in the next 60 seconds. There we go. All right, so everybody's back in. Thank you so much. I was able to visit a couple of rooms and you guys just completely rocked that. Thank you so much. So as we're going to pivot now into our final section, we're going to talk specifically about some San Diego resources. So some potential agencies that we can be using to refer our clients, and different clients are going to benefit from different agencies or a multiple, you know, visit from a few different of these of the next 7 we're going to talk about. The first one's Second Chance Program. You may be familiar with them. That's a 30-day job readiness program. They have a professional wardrobe as well. So getting some of those foundationals. So we'll try to really help everybody with, you know, things like a really 30-day, very intensive program. CEO, Center for Employment Opportunities here in San Diego. They have case management, one-on-one, and some additional resources for those, especially recent releases into the community. Alpha Project, you may be familiar with. They focus more on homelessness, homeless prevention, and they work closely with this, the state and San Diego County. Pivoting from there, you've got family health centers. As we know, our justice impacted citizens tend to have coexisting mental health, depression, occasionally substance use disorders. Family Health Center provides things like counseling referrals and physical health screenings, vaccinations, that sort of thing. Jewish Family Service have a long history of supporting our most kind of at-risk, most fragile citizens in San Diego. They do a violence prevention program that often marries really well with, you know, release from custody. And they also have a really extensive food resources program. Path San Diego is typically really active in 211. So if you call San Diego 211 on any phone, Path is one of the initial resources that they may give for you. And they try to be a one-stop shop. So they want to do homeless prevention, they want to do medical, they want to do employment. They're really trying to work on our underhoused or unhoused populations. This is a very, very quick little introduction for the California Workforce Development Board had a prison to employment virtual summit. And the opening remarks, I think, were very important. So we're only going to watch about 45 seconds, but I wanted to share this with you as well as we're talking about different virtual and organizational resources.
Hello, I am Natalie Pelugii, California's Labor and Workforce Development Secretary. I want to take a moment to welcome you to the California Workforce Development Board's Prison to Employment Digital Summit. And I also want to thank everyone serving the formerly incarcerated population for paving a pathway toward employment and away from recidivism, even during the pandemic. Our state prison system releases approximately 36,000 people per year, averaging nearly 3,000 a month. This doesn't include people being released from federal prisons or local jails in California. And at any given time, there are also more than 400,000 people on active probation in our 58 counties. California is home to nearly 40 million people, and it is estimated that nearly 8 million of us have some kind of criminal record. These 1 out of 5 Californians are affected by countless legal and regulatory barriers to employment and other critical needs for reentry. The numbers are outstanding, and they set the table for why we are all here today.
So you can absolutely watch that video. And of course, I will email the copy of the slideshow to anyone who wants at the end. I've put my LinkedIn up and I'll share the Puerto del Sol email as well. So a couple of web resources to think about. And as we get into web resources, really what I want to say is that independent one-on-one, high-touch case management is very effective in supporting our justice impacted population. So often we can flood someone like here's a resource and here's a resource and here's a resource and go do it. So the amount of intensive coaching, skills retraining, referrals, they do require what we would maybe call hand-holding a little bit more, particularly those that have been coming out of long terms of incarceration, because in custody, you're not allowed to be independent. You're not allowed to go off and do it on your own. And so to call on that skill set now that you're recently released is very difficult. So there is a job board with roles that are specifically felon-friendly employers, and that's hirefelons.org. The felonyrecordhub.com is also a really good multidimensional source of support. And in a moment, I'm going to show you a little video from Code for America that's specifically talking about automatic record clearing, particularly around marijuana convictions. As it's not illegal, it's been decriminalized in California, you have a lot of people who still have misdemeanor and felony convictions related to things that are now legal and wouldn't have ended them up in the justice system in the first place. So we'll learn more about them in just a moment. Workforce.org/reentry is a really useful and very immediate source of support, an amazing tool for your toolbox as you consider supporting justice impacted job seekers. And it's workforce.org/reentry. When you visit, they do have a lot of resources listed, but there's a lot of actionable items. So you can kind of have this website up and have your client beside you. Oh, so you need help with job coaching and faith-based, addiction recovery and housing. Okay, here, And I really value how clear this spreadsheet is. And it's sort of a one-stop shop for you on that workforce.org/reentry website. The San Diego DA's office also has a really effective and a well-beloved program called Fresh Start that works with expungements to help get these open, like recent cases, and it will show the disposition. Remember, we learned about that earlier, what shows up on an employment background screening. The disposition would show as expunged, which means it's like it never happened. Now it still shows up, but that's another thing we can say in that job interview. Talking about accomplishments, you can say, So not only am I a new person and I'm really excited for who I am, I'm so proud of my recent accomplishments, but also I've gone through the San Diego District Attorney's Fresh Start program that the record is expunged. So it's like it never happened because I was in a bad place, but I'm so proud of everything I've done to be the person sitting before you here in this interview today. So the Fresh Start program. If you've been working particularly out of the Metro Career Center for some time, you may remember that on Saturday mornings, once a month, they had the Clean Slate program, which is run by volunteer attorneys. That program was suspended in COVID and it hasn't come back quite yet. So I would urge you to just keep an ear to the ground for Clean Slate program. It was a very effective program with volunteer attorneys, senior law students, but just keep an ear to the ground because it was suspended in 2020 and it hasn't come back yet. If you were to visit the Fresh Start program, this is the screen. So it's an Office of the Public Defender. And if you just Google Fresh Start San Diego, it'll come right up. It's a sandiego.gov website. Clear My Record, we mentioned earlier, is using AI to expunge and just dismiss, get rid of some of these minor, especially marijuana related convictions. And I've got a very, very powerful brief video to show you in the time we have before we turn it over to questions from Code for America, Clear My Record. So here they are.
Over the last 3 decades, the number held in US prisons has jumped by nearly 800%.
California alone is pushing out 500,000 new convictions a year. Imagine where we're going to be at in 20 years. How many people are not going to be able to get jobs? How many people are not going to be able to get housing? What type of world are we going to be living in? What type of country, what type of city are we going to be living in? We love a good comeback story. And yet when it comes to people with convictions, we just cast them to the side. It seems pretty simple. You get a conviction, you serve your time, and you move on with your life, but that's not the case.
The current process requires a public defender or a legal aid attorney or an attorney to be involved at the front end. It requires the district attorney to spend time reviewing records. It requires the courts to go and process every record, hold a hearing, and create documents as part of that hearing. In states across the country, it is a tiny fraction of people who actually experience that relief. In California, just under Prop 64, only 3% had petitioned the court.
We in the criminal justice system were part of the problem. So I made the decision that we would do it on our own. We had cleared a little over 1,000 cases by hand, spending an average between 8 and 12, 14 minutes per case.
So we reached out to San Francisco and said, hey, let's partner. Let's use Clear My Record technology to help you, government, clear these records automatically.
We would not have been able to work as quickly as we did, but for this association with Code for America.
So Clear My Record, as it started in 2016 and as it continues actually today in 14 counties, is an online application that somebody with a criminal record can log on to, fill out a 10-minute form, and that application connects people with attorneys in those 14 counties. Moving forward to today, we flipped the question to say, why are we asking people to apply for criminal record clearance relief on their own? Isn't there a better way? Now with Clear My Record technology, we can read hundreds of thousands of lines of conviction data in just a couple minutes.
And to be able to evaluate eligibility at that speed, and to do that for everyone who is eligible in their jurisdiction, we move from a process that has taken years, if not decades, to one that can happen automatically.
We are now in 5 counties using Clear My Record technology to help district attorneys determine eligibility for Prop 64 convictions and help clear people's records who are eligible without a person with a conviction having to go and petition the court.
And the scale of the problem is huge. Having to process every single case individually and make every single person jump through all of these, very onerous hoops to get their records cleared, we're never gonna make it.
The question I ask myself is, it's not what do we have to do, but who do we have to become?
If we all work together, we can change the system.
We can help every jurisdiction clear every eligible criminal record automatically.
It is a right thing to do, it's a moral thing to do, and now there's a pathway that makes it easy for you to do.
When we think about the very ambitious goal of clearing every eligible conviction, every state has the opportunity to do just that. In California, we are on our way there, and we are on our way there at a scale and a pace that has not been seen before, and it's really exciting.
So that brings us to the end of our formal presentation. I wanted to give some time at the end to explore any questions or remarks that you may have. So I'm going to stop sharing. And we are still recording. So if you don't want to be on camera, then just leave your camera off, no problem. But if you click that mute button or you can type your question down in chat, I turn it over to all of you. James, did you have a question?
Well, I personally would like to thank you for the presentation. It was actually great for that. And learning so much about the system itself, I am really intrigued and I have a new outlook for that. One of the things I want to mention, I think that we're thinking of questions and interviewing people. We might want to remember what their strengths and weaknesses are. Because I think that's one of the main things employers are actually looking for, and they'll probably ask those questions as well.
Yeah, it's huge. That's an important point, right? All the regular career coaching things we're doing, we do all of them and this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Yeah, Jennifer.
I just wanted to say this was a great presentation. And when James Thomas and I were in the room together and doing our role playing, he just made a really important point that you have to remember that there is life before and after their involvement in whatever, like you said, oh, I made a bad decision. Oh, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever it is. So a lot of people have skills that they brought with them before, like their life or who they are is not what they did necessarily on that particular event. So I think that might help people to understand, but it's a challenge, and I think all your resources are phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Rebecca. This was very informative and a lot of information that I did not know, and I believe, just by you having this, it will help me be a better case manager and career navigator / social worker, and, better aid my participants. This is just great. A lot of information and all the resources. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. It's 90 minutes at the end of a busy workday, right? I'm so grateful that each of you found the time, like you've got lives and you've got commutes and you've got kids and, you could have been doing a lot of things after work. And so I'm so grateful on behalf of Puerto del Sol that you would come and spend some time sharpening your professional toolbox here with the California Workforce Connection. So in the chat, I've put Puerto del Sol's email. That's puertodelsol@outlook.com. And my own, my name is in my own little box, Rebecca UC, all the vowels. Eusey. Let's connect on LinkedIn, and I'll send you the slides, of course, as well. A copy of our recording with about the first 5 minutes cut off because I did not remember to hit the button until you may have heard me repeat the model of, like, in the interview, how do I bring my justice involvement? That's right about when the recording started. So that's why we got to hear that twice. So thank you very much. There's a question in the chat about the applicant tracking system and related barriers. So it's 7:29. So if you had a hard 7:30 exit, please, go with my thanks for your time and your commitment to supporting justice impacted citizens. It's a real calling, I think, and thank you for answering that calling. Really appreciate it. If you can stay to chat, I'll be here as long as you want to be. So if you have to go, of course, thank you. So to answer Maritza's question, she had some thoughts about how do we kind of navigate some of that applicant tracking system, maybe prejudice built in. So if Nick, if Maritza, if you wanted to kind of expand on that.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. There was a distinction that you offered earlier. It was when we were on the slide with imagine that appears 3 times. So you made a distinction about how maybe a job seeker might be discouraged if the ATS is bringing back certain information, and then you kind of tied that to it's not necessarily the justice impacted background. It might be more about the way the ATS is informed. I wanted to just get clarification on that.
Yeah. So if I'm PetSmart and
Okay.
I am willing, like I'm a justice friendly employer, and I am willing to, abide by the laws of California, and I would hire you. But if I'm looking for a dedicated and enthusiastic customer service professional, and your resume, you're really kind of just giving me like your master resume. It's not tailored at all to my specific job search, like my help wanted ad. In my help wanted ad, I'm going to give you everything I'm looking for. Like, must have 3 years experience. Well, if you don't outline how it's 3 years experience, I'm going to outline that I'm looking for those keywords: enthusiastic. Tell me how you were enthusiastic. Tell me how dedicated. Talk to me about punctuality. I pick those words on purpose. So if in your resume, in your cover letter, in your package, you're not addressing those fundamental, just basic keyword integration that I'm looking for in my applicant tracking system, then I'm not even going to get a chance to meet you in order to be a felon-friendly employer. And you'll be shut out because your application just isn't tailored enough.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I think I was overthinking the actual ATS algorithm and all that, but now I see that what you were describing. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and even if they're not using an ATS, like it's Mama's Pizza, Mama herself, like she put in the ad, like for a punctual, hardworking team member. So
who's enthusiastic.
Punctual, hardworking team member, right?
Yes.
Plagiarism in academia, it's keyword integration in career coaching. So I'm asking you to plagiarize, please.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Rebecca, this is George. Great presentation, was awesome. We had over about 18 people who attended tonight, so that's rocking it. In my current job, I work with case managers, and I work with employers as well, and I try to help employers fill positions. And so it's coming up more often that employers are or will hire justice impacted job seekers. And so I know there is a hierarchy of crimes, or can you allude or talk about that briefly?
Yeah. So generally speaking, the lowest level of your criminal involvement could be an infraction. So infractions are things like traffic infractions. So those are going to be like points off of your license, and infractions tend to not show up on a pre-employment background check. But they are part of the justice system. It's that you just pay a little fine. Your window tint is too dark. You have a vehicle infraction.
Right.
One kind of step above on the like worst scale from an infraction is a misdemeanor.
Okay.
So a misdemeanor is a crime. You have broken the law of the land, but you've broken it. The law is a minor law. So you threw a house party, and hey, the music is going, and the neighbors complain. They call the authorities. The police come, and if you are a little belligerent to the police officer, if you are no, it's just a party, leave us alone, the police can choose to cite you for breaking the noise ordinances. And typically it's about 11 p.m. in most counties, and they can actually give you arrest you and get you in the justice system for a misdemeanor. In this case, it would be breaking the noise law. So that's like the lowest, and that's not going to happen for most of us, but
Right.
you get a police officer on a, thank you, thank you for coming. You get a police officer in a, maybe they're having a bad day,
Right.
and so you did break the rule and you didn't stop when they asked you to, and there is a rule about noise after 11, so then that's misdemeanor. So those are things like shoplifting. Shoplifting is a misdemeanor. Jaywalking. Stephen, the answer is yes, because typically they'll get you. So the question in the chat are, do military convictions show up? Because often, that's right, it's a Maritza party with the not turning down our music. So for say that, right, well, take our current example of our misdemeanor and we'll make it military. And it turns out it's a military family. And they're like, hey, he's home from deployment. Shut up. Leave us alone. We're partying. He made it safely back. He's been gone for 9 months, whatever. Well, what they'll do is they'll get you in both courts. They'll put you up in military tribunal. So you'll go to captain's mast, M-A-S-T. Some people mishear it. They think it's M-A-S-S, M-A-S-T. It's like literally from the olden days where they would like put you on the mast of the ship, M-A-S-T. So they'll put you up on military charges for maybe conduct unbecoming an officer, if you're an officer, disobeying the orders of a direct lawful appointed over you. And then they'll get you on the civil side, and they'll get you under like San Diego or California law as well. So they'll kind of double doink you. And that way you're kind of facing, two different infractions. And then often, recently, actually, it was in North Carolina, there was a military dependent in the process of getting a divorce, but she was still a dependent at the time. She drove on base, was going to go see her ex-husband or soon to be ex-husband, and her ID was expired. And she tried to drive past the gate guard shack. Well, the military police phoned the civilian authorities, and they came and they arrested her for felony trespassing on federal property. So there's an example where it's a military base crime, but it's also a civilian crime. Sexual assault is maybe the most common of that, is that you'll get put up on captain's mast or military justice, UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they'll also arrest you for sexual assault, felony sexual assault, or felony battery, felony other crimes there. So Stephen, yeah, it often will go up both food chains, thus sort of not complicated. I mean, it's complicated, but thus compounding, because you're probably going to face reduction in rank, reduction in pay, probably up to and including getting kicked out. And now you have an other than honorable discharge, that an employer would be interested in learning about, and you are a justice impacted job seeker.
You miss one, felony.
And then, yeah, that's the kind of the top of our, so infractions to misdemeanors to felonies. So felonies are sort of the highest level, the worst level of infraction. And those are covered under statutes. Typically there are state felonies and then there are federal felonies. And I mentioned it in the presentation, the word wobbler. So WOBBLER, wobbler. There are less wobblers now than in the past. Wobblers are a tool that the district attorney will often use because the police bring the charges, but it's the DA, the district attorney, who actually takes those and puts them. So the police can arrest you for breaking that law, but what you're actually charged with can be much less. So you think about an example. I am not used to drinking alcohol and I drink too much. I didn't have a record, but I imbibed too much. And I was walking down the street and the police noticed I was like kind of walking, crazy. So the police will stop me and they will arrest me. And when they try to arrest me for public intoxication, maybe I'm a little bit belligerent. So I've been arrested for resisting arrest, public intoxication, and assaulting a police officer. So I've been arrested for 3 things. They take that file and they bring it to the district attorney, who has to actually file the charges and put the charges against you. And the DA is like, okay, I don't really have enough evidence for an assaulting a police officer. Like no one's hurt, the body cam doesn't show anything. I'm not probably going to get that conviction, so I'm going to drop that charge. So when you're watching Law and Order, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like the police arrested you for 3 things. Well, the DA says, okay, I'm not going to get you probably for that. And the penalty for felony is so much more severe. It's typically thousands of dollars in fines or years and years in incarceration. Well, it's expensive to keep someone in custody. We heard that Maryland paid $1 million for that one woman. So what the DA then does is say, okay, you were arrested for these 3 charges. I'm going to dismiss that charge. It's not even going to be on the paper anymore. And resisting arrest, well, like if this did go to a jury trial, what really is the definition of resisting arrest? Like there's not really any proof of that. You just sort of add it on the paper to just throw all the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. And there is some, and you kind of can't talk about the justice system without talking about implicit, explicit bias and prejudice and racism and the systems that are all kind of simultaneously spinning all at the same time. So the DA says, okay, I'm also not going to do that resisting arrest charge. There's not really a lot of physical proof for that. Like, how do I prove that? It's the word of the officer. But that public intoxication, you know what? We did a roadside breathalyzer, and although you were walking, so there's not a vehicle involved, but yep, you definitely blew over. 0.08 is the legal limit. You were 1.1. Yep, you were definitely drunk in public and could have posed a problem to society. So, okay, I am going to get you. And now public intoxication could be a felony. It's like the way that the statute, the law is written, it could be. Well, in this case, it's a wobbler. So like, I'm not really trying to put someone in jail for 7 years for public intoxication. You're a fool. Here's a slap on your wrist. You've paid your fine. You probably had to bail out, which I didn't even talk about bail, and I won't be talking about bail. We don't have time, but well, what a system. What a system. But it's a wobbler. So instead of getting that felony charge, I'm going to charge you lower under the misdemeanor charge. Good. So there are some things that cannot be wobbled. There are definitely felonies that are felonies. I have a list, which what I can do is I can paste it on the final slide. And as I send everybody, if it's something you're kind of curious, like what are the most common California felonies? And there are things like grand theft auto, robbery, like certain assault will automatically be felonies, and there's just no choice. Like if that's what you did wrong and the police caught you and they have proof of you doing that wrongdoing, there's nothing I can do. Like, and then you get into things like the 3 strikes law, which was passed in California, and they tried to amend it, but it's very difficult to amend it, which that's still the law of the land. So I could have had a robbery in my addiction, then I could have relapsed, had a second robbery in my addiction, and then I could have been walking drunk on the street. And oh, you know what? Public intoxication, I can choose to elevate that up. And you got 2 robberies and too many beers on a Saturday afternoon, and now you're going to jail for 25 years minimum sentencing. So there's a lot of things, moving parts with our justice system. And so it's fascinating, as you start to kind of learn a little bit behind the scene and some of the resources that are available. So working with this population, it's there, the more you are interested, the more you can uncover. There's a couple of really good podcasts, and just spending time on the different websites. The Fresh Start program website is a real wealth of information. Workforce.org/reentry, a really useful. So I think the more that you understand the justice system, then the better you are going to be at supporting those justice impacted job seekers, because you'll understand some of the words that they may use and some of the culture, because TV is there to entertain us, not to educate us. So everything you see on TV about the court system, policing, jail, it doesn't have to mirror reality, right? It's not meant to educate, it's meant to entertain. And so there's quite a lot. Maybe I'll put a couple of to refresh my memory, here's what I did. And so there's a white collar criminal who's got a TikTok, and he makes his side business is preparing people to go into jail. And that's really interesting, as he's completely transparent about, his bad decision. So it's really fascinating. So I'll write that down as my homework, the list of felonies and the list of kind of research to remind myself, because, it's been
very much. Thank you. Awesome.
All right. Any further questions before I stop recording for our colleagues and friends who might watch this video in the future? Okay. All right. I'm going to hit the button.